So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you that don't know, my name is Matt Baker. I'm the superintendent of Clinton-Massie Local Schools. Honored to be here.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen,
with
for those of
you guys tonight. Those of you that are able to join in with us, and I'm sure there'll be more joining in the very near future. Just wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about reopening plans, some ideas that I wanted to share with you, some direction maybe to give you as far as where to get information or resources. And then the main idea tonight is to take questions. We want to take questions and try to answer questions as people throw them out in the comment section. So if you have a question, feel free on YouTube to just add to our comment section there. And those questions will be filtered to me, and I'll make sure and get that information to you as best we can. Understanding there's a few questions that I don't have the answers to. The state could make some changes, and this is a fluid situation. So we'll do the best we can to get you answers. If we don't have them now, we are going to create an FAQ, an answer and question and answer sheet to send out for those that were not able to attend this live stream, to see what was talked about and to hear what was talked about. And then maybe those answers will help some other people, since we're getting questions I'm sure are relevant to more than just one family. A couple things I wanted to note to you. If you are in an in-person setting, we have added to our website what we're calling a day in the life. A day in the life is basically a kind of a step-by-step guide for students that are going to come here to school in person. We have this split between elementary, the middle, and the high school. Those can be found on the front of our webpage. And those are created based on questions that we got from surveys, from information that has come in from other people to say, hey, what will it look like if my kid comes in? And that might help me make a decision on whether I want to allow my student to come in person or whether I want my student to take the virtual education option. So that is found on our website, as well as our reopening plan. So our reopening plan, I know it can be kind of verbose, it's kind of big, and there's a ton of details in there. If there's something in there that you're unable to find, you're looking for a specific answer, and after you search that pretty thoroughly, you can't find it, then we want you to join us at cmsafeplace@gmail.com. Again, CM for Clinton-Massie, cmsafeplace@gmail.com. If you send that in, we have answered hundreds and hundreds of emails, myself, Mr. Moss, building administrators, trying to get as much information back to the parents as possible. And if you don't hear something, feel free to also give us a call. Our number here in the central office is 937-289-2471. Again, 937-289-2471. So I would point you to the direction of the plan. I would point you to the direction of the website for tons of resources. Amongst those resources, I wanted to share with you for just a second our Staggered Start calendar. So it's just a new addition that we've made to the already approved calendar that most people have seen. If you look in this, we'll say upper left-hand corner here, we've color-coded the days for a staggered start. So some people have asked me about the hybrid method, about maybe bringing back students on a smaller class basis. The board has decided that we're going to go in person and then offer a virtual education option, and then we could have to go remote if the numbers continue to get bad or if the state mandates that way. So we've allowed for a staggered start to teach new behavior expectations for our students, and honestly to practice things even for our staff. So that is listed there on this new calendar. The staggered start would be students A through G would show up on the 26th, H through O would show up on the 27th, and P through Z only on the 28th. And again, I want to be clear, as it states there, it's just those groups of students. So A through G only, and the next day would be H through O only, and then the final day, that Friday, would be P through Z only. And we understand that some households have multiple last names, and we want to make it as easy of a process and efficient of a process for your family. So just contact that building administrator, which you can go on our website to find the direct links for each building administrator's email, and you can let them know that because of different last names, we're going to synchronize household attendance. So that is also posted on our website inside the plan. So if you need to look at that to remind yourself what the days are, we're going to be moving forward with that. And on Wednesday, we have a large administrator meeting amongst the administrators, myself, Mr. Moss, Betsy Mutersma, our special ed director, and we're going to make sure we detail a few more things, and that information will be added also to the website. Not that you necessarily want, but we'll bring you back to my face here to finish a few other points. So we're also going to have a virtual education option. So at this point, we've had quite a few people sign up for the virtual education option, which is requiring people to go through the first semester. And that first semester, we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to get information prior to starting on the 26th. So that information will come out after we finish enrollment on Wednesday evening. So we'll be meeting on Thursday morning. Myself, along with Mr. Moss, our Director of Innovation Learning, our Special Director Betsy Mutersma, and additional building administration will be present to have those conversations about how to reach out now to those parents that have signed up for virtual education as their option this year. We have spoken to our Clinton Massey teachers that are going to transfer over to the VEC position. That stands for Virtual Education Coordinator. We have our teachers are going to be teaching our students. So our teachers are going to be told what their numbers are and kind of what grade band they're working with, and then they'll start contacting those parents as well. So you should see that movement within the next couple weeks or so. That is for our virtual education option. Now that's different. I want to make sure everybody understands that's different than for remote learning. So remote learning would be if we were in person and the numbers got too bad, or we were mandated by the state to go remote for all students. Similar to how we did in the spring, but with much more detail to it and more assignments and lesson and instruction going on. So that would be our in-person students having to go remote. Different than our virtual education option students. Those students would continue moving forward with their chosen virtual education option because the students are returning to the semester, and we may come back and forth between remote learning and in-person learning depending on how the virus works over the next few months. So that's just a clarification. Virtual education option is different than remote learning. Virtual education option has been chosen by parents and is a semester-long commitment. Remote learning will be a necessity for in-person if it's either mandated by the state or the numbers get to the point where we don't feel safe coming back to school. So just a clarification on those. I get a lot of questions about open house, and I'll be honest with you, that's a totally understandable question. There's a lot of balls to juggle for open house. We're concerned about bringing people in and exposing if we don't have to. So we had kind of funneled down our plans, but our administrators have asked us to maybe even have some more conversations about that on Wednesday. So we're going to be meeting on Wednesday to finalize plans for open house. Some aspects of open house will be virtual. Some grades will be virtual. We're also talking about some in-person possibilities as well. So if you'll give us just a few days on open house, we'll make sure and clarify those details and get those out to the public. Also, it was requested by our preschool coordinator, Betsy Mutersma, to make sure people understand that are in preschool. We will receive a call by Wednesday with information, and there will be information actually on our website as well regarding orientation and the staggered start for preschool, which happens every year, and then any updates that are related to preschool. So that's a majority of what I wanted to share just to start things off. It seems like we have some questions that are starting to arrive. So I would like to take just a moment and review a few of those and see if I can start answering a few of those questions. And I will do my best to make myself, loud enough. I understand there might be a little feedback coming back from our AC unit here, so I will purposely speak a little loud. So it says, will students be able to sit with friends when they are assigned seats for lunch? So I've given our middle school and high school administrators the direction that I want to give students about a week to find their seat. Our elementary is a little bit different because that lunch, besides kindergarten, will be in class. So I'm assuming there'll be an understanding of where people can sit, where students can sit in the elementary level. But middle school, high school, we are actually going to be able to social distance in the lunchrooms. It's going to be a safe environment. We can spread kids out. In fact, in the high school, we're going to be in the auditorium and then stretch that space into the foyer area. We've added additional tables, or we will add additional tables there, and we're going to limit students to probably 3, at most 4 per table. Mr. Seaver and I, as well as Mrs. Ottaway and I, have talked about allowing students that first week to kind of get a feel for where they want to sit, but then after that, we will need them to lock into a seat, mainly because of contact tracing. So if a student does test positive, we need to go back within 48 hours, according to the Clinton County Health Department, and kind of see where that student interacted with other students and staff members. And it would be very beneficial and helpful if we're able to tell them that they were sitting with this particular group at lunch. So will you be able to sit with your friends? The answer would be more than likely yes, based on the fact that you would have a smaller amount of students allowed at a table setting. Will the buses be sanitized after high school but before elementary pickup? We are working on that solution right now. So there are a few parameters that are in place that are expectations for the amount of time that it takes for the agent that we're using to disinfect, and the bus has to basically sit for a while. So we're working with our third-party company that has CDC guidelines for cleaning to see if we can fit that time period in between our elementary and high school routes. Obviously, the buses will be sanitized after the morning routes and before the afternoon routes, because we have that time allotted between the two, or even after the morning routes and before a preschool pickup route that's in the afternoon. But we're still working on a solution to get it done between the high school, middle school, and the elementary pickup for both the AM and the PM. There's a question about PPE arrived for staff. I actually was able to go down to our secret location, if you will, that has been allotted for PPE, and yes, we have received a tremendous amount of PPE. So I want to send a kudos out to Stephen Ford. Stephen Ford saw this coming even in early March and decided to start placing orders. And even as people were canceling orders, he had backup plans in place. So I went down today, I took loads of pictures. We have over 1,300 face shields. That would be for staff and for students to allot a certain amount for students that forget their mask, or if their mask becomes rather useless during the day. We have about 250 KN95 masks that we're going to distribute to our staff. Then we have another 250 stations that have been put out in the entrances. So I do feel confident PPE has arrived. Our work with our clinic staff, students, so that has, those barriers have also arrived. We've collected, I think, 13 or 14 barriers that are anywhere between 3 to 5 feet wide, about 6.5 foot to almost 7 feet tall, and they have a protective plastic shield. Necessarily call those PPE, but at this point we have enough supplies and materials that we produce for preschool and kindergarten, and then we're going to continue to move up to first and second grade and so on and so forth. We've also done some stand-up barriers that we will be able to use in the high school, middle school level to separate some seating. And the hope is at some point, even with masks on, we're able to face students back towards each other if they wanted to do some sort of group work with these barriers in place. Just a quick idea would be, imagine a plus sign and students with a plastic barrier in between being able to face each other. So a day in the life for a virtual learner, it says, what would a day in the life look or schedule look like for a virtual learner? There is going to be an expectation that is given by the VEC of how much interaction and screen time is expected on a daily basis. And I am going to leave that to the VEC because it's different for each grade level to discuss with the virtual education learners and their parents. Excuse me. I would also say that we're going to have offline activities. So there's going to be an enrichment and intervention portion of that program as well. So even though our curriculum is produced by a third party, we're going to have individual assignments that are produced by our teachers, and teachers will be interacting with those assignments. And also, whenever there's somebody struggling or a student or a parent reaches out to say a child is struggling, they're going to set up an intervention with them. That could be through a Google Meet, a kind of a one-on-one, maybe a conference call. And then we've also created a space in our annex. So for those of you that are familiar, for a while here, we had a Sinclair branch campus in our annex. We called that the CM College. So that room has kind of been disassembled and then reassembled as a VEC workroom. So that VEC workroom would allow students to actually come by appointment here on campus to meet with a VEC under a safe protocol to actually interact one-on-one, and those will be options for students as well. The day-to-day grind, I think that again would probably be left best to the VEC and the conversation with a parent and a student. There's going to be numerous needs that we're going to have to take into account, whether it's special education or there may be a medical need that has to be met while that student is at home as well. So we're understanding of that. But it's going to be an expectation that you're online for a certain amount of time. I maybe see the spirit of this question being, does a student have to sit in front of a computer equal to the 6.5 hours that another student may be in class? No, that would be realistic for a student to just simply stare at a computer for 6.5 hours. So there's going to be a combination of screen time as well as offline activities. We also are looking at some counseling pieces. So we want potentially a counselor to reach out or a social worker to reach out to some of these students and make sure they're staying connected with the needs that they have in the school, as if they were here in the school district. If I choose in person, can I switch to virtual during the middle of the first semester? So the answer to that would be no, because we need to make sure we are having the proper amount of staff, and we have to do that hiring now. So we're going to set our numbers for virtual education options now, and I can't just add students throughout there. Now, there is a different program, and I hope not to cause more confusion with this, but we have an online program that already exists here in Clinton, Massey. It's called Falcon Flex. So Falcon Flex, right now, the criteria for Falcon Flex would be an administrator recommendation or a medical need that is supported by a doctor's note or at least a team meeting where we can discuss what the concerns are. So that program is all year long. If a student that was in the midst of the first semester felt like they had a need that was a medical-based need or an administrator recommended need, we would be able to look at putting that student into Falcon Flex. Falcon Flex would be equal to like an Ohio Connections Academy or a Govs from the Warren County area. So it's a completely online program. It's supported by a Falcon Flex coordinator and a Falcon Flex guidance counselor, as well as social workers. They're also a part of that program as well. And that program already exists. We've already been doing that. In fact, kudos to Julie Kirby, who kind of got that program up and running for us and does a great job as we transition to other staff that are going to take on that role this year. That would be the option right now that would allow you to move from an in-person to a virtual in mid-semester, but then you're locked into a program that goes the entire year. And right now, the basis to get in that program would be a medical need or an administrator recommendation. So that conversation would start with the building administration and work its way up to the Falcon Flex coordinator. So a lot of questions come out about what happens if someone tests positive in one of my child's classes, and I assume that would be maybe a staff member or another student. Does my child have to be tested or quarantined? So we are kind of unique. We're split between, we're not split equally, but we have Warren County and we have Clinton County as well. Those two counties are both real supportive in our needs as far as making sure that people have testing and contact tracing. So we'll work with the Clinton County Health Department and the Warren County Health Department to figure out whether your child needs to be quarantined or tested. That will actually come from the health department. So it's our job, and we have flow charts that we follow as a building administration team that kind of walk us through the steps in the process when we get the report of a potential positive or even a symptomatic kid. And and that information, a positive test, would go to the Clinton County Health Department and the Warren County Health Department, and those people would actually make contact with the parents of that student to start doing contact tracing. Then the Warren County Health Department or the Clinton County Health Department would then touch base with us and say, okay, here are the people we're going to quarantine. Here are the people that we're going to consider exposed. Here are the people that we, have suggested that they go get tested. So that information won't be a requirement necessarily from the school, but more from the Clinton County or Warren County Health Departments. There is a little battle in the term exposure. So CDC has put out their exposure and their expectation of what health departments should follow, but it is a guideline, and the two health departments that we work with have had conversations in large group superintendent settings. I'm a part of the Warren County group. I'm a part of the Clinton County group as well. Both great groups of people and very open and honest, trying to help each other out. We're all trying to help each other out in this very tumultuous time. But the exposure definition right now is up for a little bit of debate. As it sits right now, Warren County will look at exposure for a student that has spent a prolonged amount of time, and right now they're considering that over 15 minutes within 6 foot of proximity, and that does include with or without a mask. So if they feel like that student has been in close proximity, so within that 6 feet, and that student has been exposed for more than 15 minutes, now there are a ton of factors involved, and that is, was the student facing a certain direction? Did the student pass by other students? These are all things that will be looked at by the Clinton County and Warren County Health Commission, but they will use that information that is shared by the parent to give us information of who we should contact to let students, staff, whoever know that there was a positive case within that building. Okay. Okay, so no, I have a question here. So are you asking for proof of a negative COVID test prior to start date? So I just for clarification, start date as far as the start of school, the answer would be no. And then I'm maybe reading into that as a return back. So right now the information that's being put by both Warren and Clinton Health Departments is that we do not have to have a negative COVID test prior to that student starting back to school. There are parameters that we have to follow as far as how many days that student is out from when they either became symptomatic, whenever the test was taken and then proven positive, or whether they were possibly exposed by a positive person. So those are all in line already, and that information we can share with you, and we actually have those flow charts, like I said, ready to go. On Wednesday, we're going to make sure that the administrative staff is on board with those and send those out so people understand, and that information is already found in our reopening plan that can be found on our website. So to answer that question, as of right now, there's not going to be a proof needed of a negative test prior to the start of school, and even as of now, to get back into school, there's not a negative COVID test proven to start back to school. Yeah, this is a great question. So what happens if my child if a child in my son's class gets COVID, tests positive, will the entire class be sent home? Possibly, yes. I don't know, the inner workings of what the Clinton County or Warren County Health Departments will, use as factors. They've given us examples of things that could affect or may not affect. Again, mask, no mask, proximity, time, but it could be that they decide because of whatever scenario has played out that an entire class could be quarantined, which would include the staff member as well. Now, what does that look like for your child that comes home to another child? They've mentioned that same thing. Now, there's a term, and I know this is going to sound confusing, but we've been told to use a contact of a contact is not a contact. So try to explain that, but I feel like I'd create more confusion. Basically, student A contacts with student C. then student A contacts with student B, that doesn't necessarily mean that student B has been exposed. Again, these are the definitions and explanations we're receiving from the health departments. So could it be that your child who has now been exposed and sent home could be, as the definition stands right now, exposing your other children? Yes, that could be a possibility. So again, that'll be more on the Clinton County and Warren County Health Departments contacting you as a parent and asking what the, I guess the home scenario is. And they have stated to me that they're starting to get a little bit of resistance to people getting phone calls about, where have you been, contact tracing. And, it feels like a little bit of invasion of privacy. And by no means am I asking for, political stance here or anything. I would hope and ask that our parents do the best they can with the understanding that the intent and the purpose of their questions is just to make sure everybody has information that can allow them to make decisions that's best for their own family. So how will non-sport extracurriculars work for schools? So that's things like student council. So that has come up in our Warren County and Clinton County superintendents meetings. We've looked at how that could be done through social distancing in larger areas, and making sure that we note where students are. So we either assign seats in those meetings or we have a sign-in sheet to let us know who's been in contact with who. So as of right now, it looks like we're able to do this as long as the venue would allow us, meaning a larger setting to do that. So that would be student council. I believe there's like Bible club, things like that. As of right now, we would want to keep those. Now, there may be a stop to all extracurriculars put on us by the state, whether that's athletics or academic extracurriculars, and then we would adhere to that mandate. It says, what will the classroom setup look like? Will the kids be 6 feet apart? So the classrooms, that's a tough question to answer because we have so many types of classrooms. But in the plan, it states things like we're going to face students forward for the most part. Some classes in those really young grades will have barriers that will allow for some added layers of protection. Will the kids be 6 feet apart? For the most part, I would say no. Now, there are some classrooms that will allow for that because of either a lower amount of students in an elective class or maybe a smaller core class where students can be socially distant. Some will have barriers again for extra protection that allow for kind of a replication of that social distance, especially with the extra layer of protection with the masks as well. Some classrooms will be able, because they're larger in size, to be socially distant. So the first thing I would think of is like a large science lab. You actually could possibly set up to where students are wide enough, and we have some classrooms that would meet that criteria. But I think as a general question of will students be 6 feet apart, the answer would be no. That we'll do it the best we can. We'll separate where we can. We'll try to stretch from 3 feet to 6 feet when possible. But the expectation is that as we bring students in, we're going to just do the best we can to keep them apart with other barriers and safety precautions in place. That's one of the main reasons we looked at a block schedule in that 6 to 12 space, is to lower the amount of interactions with students and create smaller cohorts. That's why we're having elementary teachers change classes instead of students, to make sure that they were able to lower the amount of transitions in the building and try to create less exposure. So, yeah, so locker information, that there is no locker information as of right now. We looked at possibly doing bags, but there's been a lot of trepidation about bags and basically spreading germs and carrying germs in the bags or on the bags. So right now the plan is we have a larger, in the 612 space, we have larger transition times built into the schedule, which would allow us to stagger students going to their locker. So we would make sure that we're allowing only a certain amount of students out in the hallway. They'll have masks on and they'll have to be socially distant as best they can. We won't have this large, conglomerate of students going all at once and in between class like we normally would. So for virtual learning, how and when do those classes get scheduled? So if you're talking about our VEO option, that contact will be made with the VECs once we close off the enrollment processes on Wednesday night. So we've chosen for the most part the VECs. We'll probably make a little bit of an adjustment depending on what the numbers do, and the numbers have risen quite a bit in the last couple of days. So those VECs will start reaching out to their students to talk about class scheduling. We're also going to have some counseling support to do that as well. I don't have an actual, like a drop dead date. I would guess, as we start transitioning and those conversations happen, I would say at best over the next couple of weeks, you should see some sort of first contact made to say, I'll be your VEC, and you'll start communicating with that person individually, that VEC individually, and then that VEC will start talking to students about trying to either mimic the classes that they asked for in 612, knowing that we don't have the same exact offerings in the virtual space, or we'll try to make sure that we're at least getting our core content in the elementary level and then expanding from there. So if we choose online, how does that affect our child's GPA? It reads that they will strictly be given letter grades. Will that not be eligible to receive as high of grades as a person student? So I'll be honest, I'm not sure if I'm reading that with clarity. For elementary? Yeah, I guess my confusion, and Mr. Moss is here to help me out here. My confusion, I guess, is at the elementary level is the question regarding standards based versus grades. And you're right, there will be a grades portion versus a standards based in the elementary grades. But as far as the 612, the GPA system is the same, or the grading system is the same. So it says, will they not be eligible to receive as high of grades as in-person student? Is that maybe related to the weighted part of the grades? It may be, yeah, if that's the case, if it's related to the weighted part of grades, there is CCP weighted that are the same. So if you were a high school student taking a CCP class, either through the VEO option or through the virtual education, the VEO option, or in person or online in person, meaning you were taking it through Sinclair but proctored by a teacher here, those grades are the same and the weights are the same. But if there's a honors level class here that's weighted, we also offer honors level classes at the high school level through our VEO program, and there's a lot of the same classes that are offered, so those would follow the same weighted grades as well. Right. So, yeah, I hope that clarifies. So, CCP will be the same. So, if you have a weighted CCP class that you're taking online through the VEO option, that would carry the same exact weight as if you were taking it in-house, if you will, with one of our teachers. So that exists currently. So you can take an online CCP class through Sinclair, and you can take a proctored by Clint Massey teachers from Sinclair, and you're still going to have a weighted grade similar to either scenario. Then there's honors classes that are offered through, our program, in essence, our Clint Massey High School program, and there's honors classes that are pretty similar, if not the same types of classes that are offered in the Apex Learning. Those would carry the same weight. So I believe there won't be a larger discrepancy, or as large of a discrepancy that might be perceived. I apologize, we're now getting rain added to the mix, so I'll speak even louder. Other than honors classes, are all other classes available choosing the online option? Example, taking both geometry and algebra 2. So those particular classes are offered, and there are honors version of those that are offered. There are conversations that would probably happen with a counselor on whether those can happen at the same time. There are scenarios where you can take geometry and algebra 2 at the same time in person, but that's not a normal setup. Just to go back to the original question, are all other classes available choosing the online option? No. So we cannot mimic the exact same schedule that you would have in person. It's just not possible. So by choosing the online option, you are potentially taking away electives that you would have had as options if you were in person. I can't offer American Sign Language, for an example, in an online version where I can't offer that in person here through a CCP Sinclair class. So are all classes available? No. You're going to have to make some choices and say the online version is okay with me and it hits most of my needs, or if not all my needs, or I'm going to go in person because of things like band or ASL or something like that. Are students allowed to wear ball caps to allow for face masks attached to them? Yes. So actually, I just had a version of that come in today for our staff. So we received the clip-on face shield versions, and I think that meant face shields. So yes, if a student, actually there's multiple layers of protection there. So having a ball cap on would allow for respiratory droplets not landing in people's hair, and then they would have the face shield on as well. So yes, they will be allowed to wear ball caps if they are wearing a face shield attached to that ball cap. If a student attends virtual learning for first semester and then opts to join in person, they have the teachers there assigned to start the school year. So, right now so the question is, if a student attends a virtual learning for first semester, so they're a part of the VEO option, but they come back in person for second semester, would they have the teachers they're assigned to originally at the start of school? So not necessarily dependent on your grade band. So if we pull kids out, if the VEO option pulls kids out of the elementary, we may have to reshuffle those teachers and allow those teachers to evenly distribute the people that are still in person. So if you were to have, let's just say, Mrs. X planned as your homeroom teacher in, I'm going to pick a random third grade, and you pull your student out for VEO option, then we reshuffle those third graders to make sure we're trying to keep them as socially distant as possible, and your student decides to come back in the second semester, they won't necessarily have Mrs. X. We'll have to see where there's openings. Now, could it be that teacher? Absolutely. Is it going to be that teacher guaranteed? No, not necessarily. If they were a high school or middle school student, more than likely we'd be able to fit them back into their schedule that they already possess right now. Now, there may be some exceptions to that. We have some high numbers in certain classes, especially electives. So it might be that second semester is either, it doesn't have an offering that is available right now because we had a full class basically. And remember, we're still going to get students that enroll into Clinton Massey during this time period. In fact, just since our COVID break, we've had 34 new enrollees. So, and I don't mean open enrollment, I mean students that have moved into the school district as resident students. So we're actually continuing to get new students. We have new housing developments that are going up where we're starting to bring in students from those as well. And there's homes for sale right now. So we're going to continue to get students. As we continue to get students, we're going to place those students in the openings that are available, and we'll make sure that we try our best to get your child back into that schedule, but there's absolutely no guarantee that we can mimic their schedule perfectly.
Follow up to the question about face shields. If you wear masks and a ball cap, is there a mask attached to caps as well?
So follow-up question to the face shield. So that actually was accurate to say ball caps with face masks. I'll be honest with you, I would ask to be allowed to research that a little bit. I'm not familiar with face masks that attach to a ball cap. Maybe it attaches somewhat to the bill. If it adds a layer of protection, on my administrator agenda for Wednesday, I actually have that question planned, which is the conversation about hats. I believe the administrators are 100% supportive of a student that wants to wear a ball cap and wear a face shield attached to it. We are allowing that option for our staff as well. That'll be something that possibly our nurses do in our clinics. So I see that as a something I've researched and feel confident to speak of. The mask part, I'm going to ask you to give us just a little bit of grace and patience. Let me do a little reviewing and then add that to this FAQ, this fact sheet that'll come in after this. Okay, so mask breaks, that's come up quite a bit. So I used the term mask breaks in a work session, and I got quite a bit of response from staff and students of what does that actually mean. So it's a little bit of a general statement, but basically we want to allow for some time for students to be able to remove their masks safely. So I'll just give you a few examples right off the top of my head. We are going to put areas and stations in the hallways, probably more focused in the middle school and the elementary area, that allow for students to leave their classroom, especially when maybe they're in work or after a transition time, and they get to go to that station and they're able to remove their mask safely. So there might be a logic poster up and kind of a riddle up there, or some sort of steps to go through in their mind of solving problems, and we might even attach some sort of small prizes to those, but not manipulatives, not things that you're actually going to move and change around, because that would be unsanitary, but just the opportunity to get out and be able to remove their mask for a little while, because hallways are going to be relatively clear. Our transitions are going to be cut way down, and we're going to cut down the hallway traffic, so that would allow for mask breaks maybe in the hallway. We also have rented tents, and we're going to use those as outdoor space, or we might simply just take students outside in order to give them that mask break. So there might be I'll just use a random choice, but the 6th grade team may set up that they're going to have mask breaks during their second block, and they're going to do them in a staggered time, and the first teacher may take their child or their students outside for a little while, may take them to the gymnasium if it's not being used, may take them to our Falcon gym, which is our annex gym, if it's not being used, in order to give those kids mask breaks and allow them a little time away from that. So choir, band, and gym. Great question, one that comes up all the time. So I actually have a Warren County Superintendent meeting on Wednesday. The number one agenda item, meaning the first thing we're going to talk about, is choir and band. So here's my approach right now, and I would ask you to understand that this could change, whether that's because it's mandated to change or we just decide to take a different approach. But one of the main reasons I came up with the 10 idea is I want to make sure we can still try to allow band and try to allow choir and try to allow PE, even because it would be similar in an outdoor space, where students don't have to wear a mask and still participate in these electives. So the idea is that we want to stretch out the space and make it safe. So right outside of the band room, the double doors that exit out of the high school, there's going to be our largest tent right there. And that's going to allow students to play instruments outside of the building. So there is going to be a rule that you can't play an instrument that involves air inside of the band room. Now, they may be able to go to the auditoria, they may be able to go to the gymnasium, they may be able to go outside, they may be able to use the covered space that's the event entrance, similar to how the choir will have those same options. So we're going to be socially distant, if not farther away, because obviously singing and yelling and those type of things may cause even more respiratory droplets. But if we're in the auditoria, the gymnasium, underneath the event entrance, or under one of the 10, we should be able to separate where we're safely able to do that. That's also going to be at the discretion of the teacher. So I want to make sure some of our band and choir teachers have those conversations and say, hey, I've started this process and I don't really feel comfortable, so we're going to put it on pause until the numbers start to lower, or maybe we come up with a different setting, maybe some barriers, something to that effect. So we're going to try our best to make sure that we're still able to have those electives and distance them apart. Yes. So one of the things that's asked is about classes. So the reason we're going to try to create as much outdoor space as possible is that any class would go out there. So I've spoken to numerous teachers to say we'll have some sign-up sheets and you'll be able to take your class out. to whether it's a tent space, whether it's the stands out in the stadium, both visitor and home. We can take kids out onto the tennis court. The American Pediatric Association says that the transmission rate reduces if we're outside. So we want to try to create as much outdoor education space as possible for all classes. That's why we're trying to, use those tents and use outdoor space that's already available to us. So we're coming down to, I kind of wanted to create about an hour worth of time here. So we're coming down to the last 8 minutes or so, and I'd like to just share one thought at the end. So I'm going to answer a few more questions. There are numerous other questions listed here that I'm not going to get time to be able to talk about specifically, but I want to make sure you know that we're going to answer these questions and send them back out as an FAQ. So can I purchase a desk barrier for my elementary child to use at his desk when seated instead of wearing a mask? At this time, no. We will have barriers that we are creating. That my concern about if we start opening up to parents basically providing barriers, I have no idea what we're going to get. There could be a safety issue. There could be issues, and I've actually talked about this with our legal counsel. It's similar to how we've had people say that we want to donate homemade masks. And at the advice of our legal counsel, we appreciate that. And if those people making homemade masks distribute them to parents and students individually, separate from the school, then that's totally fine. We're not going to inspect every single one coming through the door and necessarily look at that on a individual basis, only when necessary. But I can't hand out a homemade mask and say this meets the criteria of Clinton, Massachusetts local schools to say, this is now accepted as our liability. So I would find that similar conversation in a desk barrier. So I don't know about heights and widths and lengths. We have built some desk barriers in the preschool and the kindergarten space that we feel comfortable with, both the leadership of that building and the teacher leadership of those grades. We've met numerous times and kind of got on the same page of what that would allow them to do at the making of desk barriers from our maintenance crew. Will they be able to remove their mask while sitting at their desk? So right now the premise would be for our pre-K and our kindergarten students to be able to work behind a barrier without a mask, but that is going to be at the discretion of the teacher. So the teacher is going to have the final say, if we will, over whether that student and the confidence of that student's developmental ability would allow them to remove a mask. And I guess an example of that would be if a student understands the idea that we're going to stay behind the barrier and we're going to speak behind the barrier, and they can feel confident as a teacher that that student recognizes that, then maybe that allows that student to take the mask off. Also, if they're working as an individual student with their barrier up, my hope is that they would be able to remove their mask, and that's what we talked about with the leadership in those particular grades. Will there be financial assistance for those in need of testing if someone is required by the health department to get tested? At this time, we don't have an avenue where we've set up financial assistance for testing. I do feel like we have a very strong community that makes themselves available whenever there's a need present, and I see that on a regular basis. In fact, I might even speak to that in just a second, but if that is a need that presents itself, someone needs testing and there's financial assistance needed, I can feel confident that either through our booster program, through our maybe our CM fund that is produced by, what am I thinking, totally escaping me for a second. Sorry. I can't remember what they're called, but I do believe that there's option out there if there's financial assistance needed. I guess the best thing I can tell you is contact the central office. Again, 937-289-2471 if the need is presented. I'm actually going to stop there for just a second and speak just for a moment kind of about that community aspect. A couple quick points before we close up shop here. And again, those that have presented questions, we have copied all those down. It looks like there's another 6 or 7, maybe 10 or so that we're going to answer and put back in FAQ. So it's not that we're ignoring your question, we just can't get it to in this allotted amount of time. A couple quick things. First and foremost, I've had a lot of people reach out to me about the loss of a Clinton Massey family member here actually today, and just that process that's happened over the last few days or so. It is amazing to see the Clinton Massey community come together as we have, and we're going to send our thoughts and prayers to the Smith family. And for those of you that don't know, I'm sure you can ask around. I'll allow you to do that research on your own. But I just want to compliment the Clinton Massey community yet again. It is amazing to see the outreach. I mean, my phone is just numerous text messages and emails saying, hey, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do to help this family out? That is the expectation here, and not the expectation from me, from each other, for each other. So it's a compliment to our community. It truly kind of chokes me up when I see the amount of outreach. And I've had staff members contact me and say, hey, I want to do this. I'm going to start this process. And I'm ready and willing to wait and help and do whatever we can from the Clinton Massey side. So again, just to reach out back to the community and say thank you for being willing to do that and being understanding that needs present themselves all the time. And I've never seen a situation yet that Clinton Massey as a community hasn't stepped up to say, we're here, we're supportive, you're a Falcon family member, and we're going to hold you up in this time of need. And also understand, kind of my last point of bringing this to a close as far as these questions, this is again a living situation, a living document as far as the plan, and it's malleable. It's going to be moved. It's going to be manipulated numerous times. The numbers change all the time. The mandates change. The qualifications, the guidelines change all the time. We do ask for grace and patience in this process, and for the most part, that's what we've seen. I've gotten a lot of communications, and I appreciate those communications of, hey, we appreciate what you're doing for us as administrative staff, as a maintenance staff, as a custodial staff, and we understand that this is a moving target with no perfect answer. And I would just ask to continue that grace and patience. I understand that as we're getting closer, anxiety is rising. It's rising for our staff members, it's rising for the students, it's rising for parents. And although I can't say some magic statements that's going to make all that anxiety go away, what I can tell you is if you have concerns, please reach out to us personally using either the cmsafeplace@gmail.com, again, cmsafeplace@gmail.com, or you can email me directly at matt.baker@cmfalcons.org. Again, matt.baker@cmfalcons.org, and myself or Mr. Moss or one of our building administrators will get back to you. I just want to make sure that information is correct when it's being distributed to other people. And I've had a lot of people kind of vent their frustrations through other people that have never contacted me. And I understand that everybody's living busy lives and it's hard to stop for a moment and send something. But I just implore that if you're concerned about a situation, if you need an answer that's going to maybe push you one way or the other to how you want to approach this school year, please reach out. We will do the best we can to respond back to you as quickly as possible, understanding that there are deadlines, but at some point we need to adhere to those deadlines to make sure that we're able to staff this VEO option and make sure our staff that's going to be in person has all the resources and support they need. So again, I suggest that if you have a question specific that you either don't get answered through this FAQ or we weren't able to get to tonight, if you've maybe reached out to a fellow community member and you're not sure if that information is accurate or you want to double check, just send it on to us, cmsafeplace@gmail.com. Again, cmsafeplace@gmail.com. Have a great rest of the evening. Stay safe, and you know how I have to end it. Go Falcons!